Good evening and welcome to Sugar Silk and Stretch, a unique boxing podcast brought to you exclusively by Ace Podcast Nation. My name is Ben Doughty.
My name is Michael Silk Olajide, and I'm wondering why you're starting it so dour, Mr. Doughty.
I'm starting it so dour. I'm glad you asked me that question, Silk. I'm glad you asked me that question, Michael. It's because I thought our ident was going to play that thing that goes like, and it shows the Sugar Silk and Stretch, and it didn't seem to happen for some reason. So that's why, a little bit.
Well, I did see the face, Ali's face. The greatest of all time.
Say again.
I did see Ali's face.
You saw it?
Up yeah. Absolutely.
In that case, that's great. In that case, that's wonderful. As long as they saw Ali. I don't know if we're going to run into problems down the line, by the way, for using his image when we didn't run it by anybody, but I'm guessing it's going to be okay for our, kind of logo. So, Michael, last night, Katie Taylor turned the tables on Chantel Cameron at the 3 Arena in Dublin and became the undisputed female light welterweight champion of the world, in addition to the fact she's already the undisputed lightweight champion of the world. It's funny, I remember when Henry Armstrong I don't remember it personally, I wasn't alive, you understand, but I remember reading about Henry Armstrong when he was featherweight, lightweight and welterweight champion of the world, undisputed, all at the same time. They forbade him to do that, and they put it into the books that you had to relinquish the title. They don't seem to have that situation in the women's game in 2023, because I've not heard that anybody has questioned Katie's status. Let's start at the start. You seem to have the conviction that was a knockdown in the first round that Chantel Cameron scored.
Bro, even before we get there, Ben, I'd like to say that one thing I want to say about you can make generalities, and generally generalities aren't very good. But in this case, I just got to say that there's one thing about all female fighters: they have the greatest hearts. Like, they have the kind of hearts that are practically overkill. It's crazy. It's commendable to a fault, really.
Yeah.
We get to stuff. We can delve into that after we obviously talk about what you want to talk about. But I mean, it's so glaring, the heart, the energy, the fact that they want to be exciting, they want to represent boxing in the purest of light, and because of that, so many things. It's all about whoever is the most aggressive is generally the winner. Whoever is the one who engages the most or throws the most punches, not the one who rides punches, gets under block, shows the skill, and comes back with scintillating combinations. Those kind of people, it's not a part of female boxing really yet, for the most part. Anyway, there are exceptions, I'm sure, but it was really interesting to see, and hearing the commentators talking about it's the greatest fight of the year and all the rest of that kind of stuff. I was like, okay, let me see how this plays out. But anyway, let's go to the starting point. What you said. I'm sorry. Could you repeat your question, Ben? I thought
You seem to think, and Julian McGowan, my good friend, is preempting what I was about to say as well. But you seem to think it was a knockdown. To paraphrase your text to me earlier, you said, I saw the first round knockdown. That was ridiculous, the fact they didn't allow it as a knockdown. Julian McGowan said what I was going to say. He said, slowed it down, glanced the shoulder, Taylor's jab, Taylor counter jab quickly, and Cameron blocked, and Katie jolted backwards quickly. It looked to me like I'm going to show a clip, by the way. It looked to me like it landed under the arm or on the armpit. That shot, which is a bit of a grey area, really, not literally.
I mean, not really, not at all. The way those rules of boxing are is if the punch hits in a legal scoring area, and nobody scores a punch to the armpit, and they counter. But if you go down from the force of the blow, you go down from the force of the blow. It's a knockdown. It may not be a knockdown that's going to give you a long count or put you in jeopardy, but it is a legitimate knockdown.
Well, I don't know about that, because particularly if you strike someone in the chest, the women are not allowed to hit in the chest, right? In the same way the men, it's anything goes.
I'm not sure about
that.
Are those the rules?
Would you think it's okay to hit in the breasts? I would guess.
I mean,
no.
they have protectors, right? They wear protectors.
Yeah. Well, we got protectors on the abdominals. You're not allowed to hit people in the crotch, are you?
Well, you're not allowed to hit them in the testicles, and now we have the whole
not allowed to hit them on the cup.
The whole controversy of where that starts. You know what I mean? But
listen, I'm going to play the clip because Julian McGowan saying the punch did not push her backwards, Ben. I'll send it to you. Let's play the clip. Ready? What I need to find, we've got videos here. Okay. Bear with me for a second, guys, while I get this.
We're
This
getting
is
good.
cool. Okay, are you ready? You ready for
Yeah,
this?
I'm ready. Let's go.
I've slowed it down for you, Silk. I've slowed it down for our audience. I want you to have a look at this. Don't try and fight your corner. Just look at it objectively, like literally you've never heard of it until now. Ready?
Okay.
Are you seeing it?
Yeah. I saw it.
Okay, great. I didn't see it. It's
Could
weird.
could you play it one more time?
I can. Excuse me, ladies
Okay.
and gentlemen. I'm going to play it again. I can't see it. The interesting thing is you can see it, but I can't. How funny is that?
Okay. Sorry, I only see half of it, right? So,
Are you ready?
yeah. It hasn't been played, Ben.
You said you've seen it
Oh,
once.
here it goes. Here it goes. Okay. Yeah, that's a legitimate knockdown. That's a punch thrown with force. And if you go down from the force of a punch, if it hits in the scoring area, and it looked like it hit her more in the neck area, like here, like in the
I don't
neck.
think it hit her on the neck. No, Silk. I think it hit her here, honestly.
No, it didn't hit her in the under the armpit. That's impossible. She didn't even raise her hand like that.
What are you saying, guys? It looks like a punch on the shoulder, says Joe. It's definitely not the neck. Watch my angle. Julian said he sent it to me. Watch the clip I've just sent you, but I can't watch clips. I can't get clips when I'm on the broadcast, unfortunately.
To
So
me,
I
it
can't
looked
see
like
it.
it was Ben. To me, it looked like it was collarbone neck area.
See, if that was the case, I would say it was a knockdown, but I don't think it was. That's what I disagree with. So you,
but play it again because you're saying it hit her in the armpit.
Yeah, it looked like it. Yeah,
but she
Katie
didn't
jabbed at the same time.
raise her hand. She didn't raise her hand to be hitting the armpit.
She jabbed at the same time. She jabbed at the same time. Absolutely. Julian
Okay,
McGann
can you
says
play one more time? Let's run that back.
No, because it's unprofessional to keep going the same clip again. But that's not a show. That's not how you do it. Julian McGowan is saying I've slowed it more different angle and it had absolutely no force. You've got the wrong angle. Julian sent me a clip.
No. Of course it had force. She stepped in on it, and the girl stepped into it at the same time. That jab was just as. I remember when who was it? Larry Holmes knocked down with the not Oscar De Leon. He was a cruiserweight. Who was that? He knocked out a kid. I think he was from Puerto Rico or the islands with a jab. Ozzy Ocasio, was that it?
Ozzy Ocasio, Jules Ocasio, yeah.
Yeah, and knocked him out with the jab, and he hit him in the side of the head, and it's a jab, and jabs by their nature, those kinds of jabs don't have that kind of power to drop you like a right hand. Like that was like a right hand. It wasn't a shotgun jab. It was just a basic jab and he went down from it like it was a right hand is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
In this instance, she stepped in with her jab and jammed it. So it was almost like if you took a 2x4, there was no bend in the elbow. It's like bow, just drove it into her, and she fell back from the force of the blow. She didn't fall forward. Her legs didn't wobble, all the rest of that kind of stuff. But she fell back from the force of the blow.
But did you see that she stamped on her foot too? Did you notice that?
No, she didn't step on her foot. I think.
Yes, she did stamp on her foot.
I think it was off.
Want to see it again? No, I'm not going to play it again because we already played it twice. She stamped on her foot.
Why wouldn't you play 3 times? 3 times is like you see everything.
Okay. Like I say, Julian McGann said he sent me a better angle, which he said if you saw this angle, it would put all the debate to bed. But all right, I can only play the clip I can play that we've got loaded up right now. Watch the feet this time, Michael.
Okay.
Cameron steps on Taylor's foot.
I watched it when I saw it earlier the first time because I thought, oh, she stepped on her foot. No.
Watch it. Cameron steps on Taylor's foot, then it finishes with Taylor's foot on Cameron's foot somehow, like she reciprocates. Watch this.
No, she missed her foot completely. Absolutely missed her foot. In fact, you could almost make a case that she caught her lower jaw and there was some sort of neurological thing going on because her back foot quit. Usually when you fall back, your right foot steps back too. If it's a non brain knockdown is what I'm trying to say. Basically, if it's a non-neurological knockdown, your foot will step back if it's a forceful thing. And her foot didn't. Her coordination about involuntarily caused her right foot not to step back, and she fell upper body first. She didn't anything else. Nothing else happened in that. That was a forceful punch that dropped her, no doubt.
You clearly want to die on this hill. The referee didn't call it. Don't say you're sticking to the guns. That's fine. I understand that. I don't agree. Julia McGann, as you can see, says the punch doesn't move her. Taylor counter jabbed and Cameron caught it. We'll have to look at this angle he sent me afterwards. You know, I wish we could play it now, but we can't. But listen, okay, that was the first round. The referee didn't award the knockdown, and things went on. You know, and I think Kate Taylor was a worthy winner. I do think that the DAZN commentary team were very biased towards Taylor. They were, you know, which is a problem in boxing generally, isn't it? You know, that we see these people who create the narrative, they have a lot to answer for.
Well, it's Taylor's hometown. I don't know how experienced the commentators are with it, but you know, you have all this juice and energy for Taylor, and she's somewhat of a legend with women's fighting. And her last 2 fights have been, you know, incredible fights, energetic fights that people want to see. So she's on the tip of everyone's tongue. She's come home. She's fighting in Ireland, and so you kind of expect that from, you know, people going to see the fight, but you wouldn't expect that from guys behind the mic. You want a nice even call. I don't think that happened. First thing, when I sat down and I started watching, you know, some of the stuff you sent me, and the first thing I would have done if I was the referee, I would take points off Taylor for excessive drinking at some point during that fight.
Yeah.
Every time they got close, like this, you know what I mean? The holding, all the rest of that kind of stuff. Now that has to, for boxing to continue to grow and develop and evolve, it needs to evolve its rules. And that's one of the rules it has to evolve. Excessive clinching for no reason. Now, if you're hurt, I understand clinch. You know, we've all been there. That's a part of the survival. But if it's a part of your fight, if you're punching and then grabbing somebody,
game plan,
grabbing them before they punch, no. That right away tells me you're not in control as a fighter, and you need to be. It's like sticking your head out the ropes, like Jimmy Young did to Ali. It's like, no, you can't squelch a combination like that. That's illegal. You can actually really block and slip punches and do all that. That's great. We want to see that, but we do not want to see holding and clinching. Gone.
People accused Vladimir Klitschko in particular of basing an entire reign on that jab and grab style. Yeah. Did you feel that way?
Yeah, I absolutely felt that way. I mean, I remember seeing Greg Page and George Chaplin, and I was just like, oh my God, these guys. It was on ABC's Wide World of Sports. I think Howard Cosell was calling it. Greg Page, Louisville Rage. And Greg was great talent. And George Chaplin, you know, I mean, he's up there in the world. So he's better than your average dude. And these guys were just holding and mauling and holding each other the whole time. And I was just like, no, this isn't a part of boxing. And once we can get rid of that, the sport's going to do better. Now, conversely, on the other side, with Cameron, I would take points immediately. Punch one. When she punches Taylor in the back of the head, that's it. I'm not even 1 second of thought. The first, she's a professional. She knows better. The first time she hits Taylor in the back of the head, I'm stopping it and I'm calling her. I'm taking a point. And then every time she does it up to then, I'm going to disqualify her after 3. That's it. I'm not playing. You can't. I mean, it's crazy. We all know by now, Ben, that punches to the back of the head are the worst shots you can get hit with.
Yeah, they can be very damaging.
Cerebral cortex is right there. All that stuff. I mean, everything is right there. And so you cannot have any patience with things like that. You need a referee that's brave, that's going to step in and do the right thing immediately for the safety of all fighters, which takes me to another point. I'm running ahead with this. I'm sorry. So maybe I'm going to wait for you to catch up to me. Do you want to talk about about any of that, like the rabbit punching or the excessive holding? What's your opinion?
I don't want to interrupt your flow. Your flow's okay, and you will be aware. Much as I like it all best when there's the 3 of us, it is more manageable when it's just you and me. Because really, we can lock each other out for 10 minutes, but I don't worry about what the other guy's feeling or he's getting pissed off. So this works, and if you want to keep flowing, that's cool. I mean, you're not the only person to talk about excessive holding from Katie Taylor. You know, they said that was the entire game plan, whereas some people are saying, well, you know, John Martin, who's part of the Atlantic City Boxing Hall of Fame, who we met when we were at NAC, he organised it with Ray McCline. He's a big Irish supporter, obviously, because he's of Irish heritage, and he was saying, no, that's just smart for Taylor because she was out-muscled last time. She was out-hustled. She did exactly the right thing, grabbing and holding. And you know, what Taylor did well, which was legal and artistic, was she was slipping Cameron's jab, and she would come back with great hand speed, like a 3-punch combination. A lot of the time, she would slip that jab and come back with 2-3-2, at least 2-3-2, and then she would grab her. After that, you know. But,
yeah. And that is to me, that's a lazy man's way out. You know what I mean?
Or lazy girl's way out.
Yeah, well, yeah, lazy boy, lazy girl, same thing. It's just because you don't have to exhibit any defensive attributes when you grab somebody, and that's, again, those are the kind of things that are hurting the sport. It's like, and not only hurting the sport, hurting the fighter, because clinching is never really an effective defense. No, it's not as effective as slipping and blocking, that's for sure.
It's funny. I watched I was seeing some highlights of your fight with Barkley the other day. So I know you've been hanging out with this weekend, and you got a little interview which we'll reveal to the channel when we've done a little production. But you, to be fair, you do have the courage of your convictions and what you practice what you were today preaching, because you were like rocking and rolling and moving and lay back and roll this way and block, and you were rolling and moving your head like a man possessed, almost like someone said, Michael, you get the $1 million prize as long as you don't put your hands on him, as long as you try and avoid punches for as long as this fight lasts in any way other than grabbing him. It's almost like you thought it was illegal to clinch.
Yeah, and you know, and in retrospect, you think, well, that's the option that's open to you, so that you would do that. But it just isn't in my nature. Like, I know I've been hit and hurt before, and guys have been on me, and I've kind of, you know what I mean? It's like someone puts your body on you, and so when they do that and try to move you, your initial your instinct is to grab them and turn them back the other way, or not go with what they're doing. But holding on to survive was never something that I thought was. Obviously, the options are there, and trainers teach you that. It's not something that I learned. It's not something I particularly wanted to learn or would be proud of either. I really thought that, you know, it's almost like if you're in a gunfight and one guy, you know, you stand off and you do your 10 paces, and then you turn around and fire, and the other guy ran behind the tree and is shooting at you from behind the tree. It's like, wait, those aren't the rules. That isn't how it works. Well, I don't want to get shot, so of course I'm going to do that. You know what I mean?
I'd like to draw your attention to that comment from Julian McGowan. I think it'll be up your street.
Yeah, he says, negating grabbers at lost art. In the pocket, elbows tucked in. No way to grab inside. See Donald Curry. Well, I mean, there are a number of ways around it, Julian. You can certainly, grab your opponent, which Ali was so famous with, like behind the head. But clinching the body, like grabbing behind the head, is one thing. Clinching and stopping the hands from moving is an absolutely different thing altogether, in my estimation.
So what do you think? Katie Taylor is being hailed now, because last night they were obviously frothing at the mouth in praise for her. I'm not going to say it was all undeserved, but it was a very highly emotive occasion, wasn't it? And perhaps it's good to look at things more in a kind of unemotive way under the test tube. Some people are talking her at this point that she's not only Ireland's greatest fighter of all time, that she is the greatest sports person ever from Ireland. Now,
oh my God,
do you think that's a little hyperbolic?
Well, Ireland's had some pretty great athletes, right? I mean, from like, I know, like golf, and let me see, soccer, and boxing, of course.
Well, let's just talk fighters.
Okay, yeah. I mean, look, Jim Watt, wasn't he from Ireland?
No, he was Scottish.
Scottish. Oh, okay, my bad. Okay, but it's a land, Ireland and Scotland, and they're pretty close. So
see, that's the thing. That's the Olajide way. Dude, double down on your mistakes. Double down like crazy on your mistakes. Do not blink. Which is easier for you because you've only got one eye. You've got to absolutely keep open. You know?
Yeah.
You're probably getting tired of the eye jokes, but the fact
is,
no.
I don't.
But Steve Collins was better, says Joe. Steve Collins was Irish. Barry McGuigan was Irish. Rinty Monaghan was another one. But the thing is, if you look at, this is the thing between statistics, Michael, and putting statistics in context, which I know you're a big advocate of the need to do that, because she is an Olympic champion, or I think she's not a double Olympic champion, I don't think, but she's an Olympic champion. She was an Irish, she's an amateur world champion. She won everything in the amateurs. She's a double two-weight, undisputed world champion.
Mhm.
But what do you think of the standard overall when you look at it? Some people will probably tell you that women are right up there now, and there's an egalitarian landscape.
There's absolutely, I mean, come on, Ben. It's like the levels of competition just aren't the same if you're comparing them to what men do.
No.
Well, you know what I mean? The levels of competition are just not the same. And when you, like, for instance, when I think everyone's game stepped up when you have a great champion. When you have a great champion, everyone's ability, because you actually, when you're a contender, or even before, when you're a kid and you're inspired by somebody, and one day you may get a chance to get in the ring with them, you're fighting better, you're learning more, because that's where you want to get to, and instinctively that you're going to have these abilities to beat that guy, and that's going to make you better.
Yeah.
In women's boxing, that isn't necessarily so. I mean,
and what about the standard? Look, what about just the aesthetic visual standard that you were witnessing when you watched those fights?
Yeah, one of the things I noticed with her, and that was with Katie Taylor, and I just thought she absorbs a lot of punishment no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what, her defensively, she's not sound at all. And I almost look at her and I see like neurological things already that just kind of
really?
like, it kind of shakes me. I see things already that kind of looked, and it could be, as Saj says right here, Taylor turned pro quite late and belatedly. And I think you can do that when everybody doesn't have incredible talent, you know what I mean? But
yeah,
I just it's hard to see that kind of ability in female fighters. I just don't see it there. The men who train them don't seem to have the expertise or the patience or whatever it is. They don't expect that of women. They don't expect.
You said this before, yeah.
Yeah, that they can do things men can. Women can slip punches. Women can parry punches. Women can feint and parry, like I was saying, and do everything a man can do, a woman can do. But you have to be patient, resilient, and you know what I mean. You have to be consistent in terms of teaching them, and they'll absorb and they'll get better at it. I mean, look, to be fair, not all men do it either, right?
Sure. I mean, and I think you've looked at fights recently, like Josh Taylor when he lost to Teofimo Lopez. You were saying, like, where was the head movement? Where were the parries? Where was the combination punches? Where were the setups? Where was his ability to ride a shot? You see some things lacking in skills across the board sometimes. I know that because
yes, absolutely, and boxing all together as one. But now we should be more advanced in that because we have the power of video, like in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, even the 70s. And partway even into the 80s, you didn't get a chance to see the guys you were going to fight before you fought them. You know what I mean? Whereas today, you have a litany. You have like a person's history. You have that right there on your fingertips on YouTube. Every single fighter, even if he's 0-15, you can see him on YouTube, and you can, you know what I mean? You can go ahead and prepare for him, the way you're supposed to prepare for a fighter. So you're getting the news early. Back in the day, you didn't get any news. You get in there and you're figuring it out on the spot.
Do you know what, Michael? That's why guys like Mickey Duff on this side of the pond or Johnny Boss on your side of the pond were so indispensable and so important back then, amongst other reasons. Because Mickey Duff, he knew everybody. He knew the fighters and he'd seen them, or he knew somebody who had seen this guy. He had links. He had intelligence. That's when intelligence really counted. You just said it. So a female fighter I won't go into the name of her. She's actually quite successful at the minute, but she approached me about helping with her career the other day. And obviously I have a look at her straight away because you can do that. Back in the day, guys like Mickey Duff, they were actually, they were fonts of information, and not everybody had that information. It was esoteric. You know what I mean? A guy like Johnny Boss, he knew fighters all over the country, in every part of the United States, and what they were capable of.
There for a second. That last sentence you broke up.
Yeah, okay. So I was just talking about how important it was back in the day to have this knowledge because not everybody had it. Whereas now, like you said, and you made me think when you mentioned the 1940s and 50s, Iceman John Scully was having a debate a couple of days ago, I see, on Facebook, and someone was talking about the way skills have improved from from back in the day. And Scully, in his inimitable way, said, "With all due respect, You 1000% absolutely do not understand the skills of the guys in the 40s and the 50s. Okay. He was like, you absolutely 1000% do not understand and are not qualified to make that call because you
Yeah.
don't understand how skilled fighters
Yeah.
were back then, you know?
Yeah, they really were. And they wouldn't use as much like excessive energy. They were very they were very cultured in their fight ability. They're very structured and very, everyone had a fight theory, and you stuck to that going into the ring, and it made sense. A lot of guys wouldn't come up out of that, and I understand that too. It's your reach of abilities will tell you what you can accomplish and what you can't. But at the same time, those guys from those days, and the kind of pain tolerance and that you'd have to go through, it's not like today at all. It really isn't. And modern day boxing is, I wouldn't say it pales in comparison, but some of the things are a lot more aggravating about modern day boxing compared to what it was back in the day, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s.
Moving on to Las Vegas, David Benavidez last night.
Do we not want to, like, there were a couple of good questions that came in. Do we not want to address them on Taylor? And
sure, you can, but can you tell me what you'd like to deal with? You can answer this one from Sarge Ali straight away if you like.
Do women's physiology make any difference in terms of style and movement, punching technique, etc.? For instance, you were talking about the chest area. Well, what do you think about that, Ben?
So here you go.
It's you first.
You were classic. I'll give it.
Ben. Ben, let me ask you one question. What's the name of this show?
Sugar, Silk, and Stretch.
Okay, so there you go. I defer to you first because you're first. You're the first name. Come on now.
Yeah. What a joy you are. Okay, so let me read the question again. Does women's physiology make a difference in terms of style and movements? Well, I don't know. I think that I don't suppose it should make a difference to essential boxing styles and ways of fighting. I mean, obviously, you talk about the chest area, which is we have a forbidden zone below the belt, and we've had arguments recently about precisely where the belt is. Quite famously in world heavyweight championship fights, they have an area which is off limits, which is right in the middle of them. Which the chest is not a scoring area in men's boxing as such, or it's a grey area, isn't it? No one ever really. People aim for the chest when you want to weaken someone. You don't expect to score points.
Nobody does it, but if somebody did it, believe me,
sometimes I was told. I remember. I'm not forgetting the question, but I remember Joey Gamache saying to me when I was sparring with Wayne Braithwaite. I'm name dropping now in full effect. Can't match you, but I'll have a go.
He's kind of big, isn't he? Isn't he kind of big for you? That Wayne Braithwaite.
He is, but it's not about size. It's about skills, and he just wasn't at the races, Silk. I've got to tell you, it was embarrassing. You know what it is. Wayne Braithwaite. Do you know what the reason why he sparred with guys like me, welterweights, was, and light middleweights? His trainer, Colin Morgan, said, whenever you put him with a cruiserweight or a heavyweight, he wants to absolutely decapitate them. He tries to kill them. He says, you guys, he has to go easy on you, and I like him. He liked him to spar with little guys, quick guys, and he said he moves with you real nice and technical, and that's good. He said, I don't like him sparring with like heavyweights and cruiserweights all the time. Yeah. So I was sparring with Wayne Braithwaite, and because he was an elusive guy, and he was a very good fighter, obviously, a WBC world champion. Yep. Joey Gamache said to me, if you can't hit him in the head or whatever, he said, try and hit him in the gloves or the arms or the chest. He was trying to tell me to hit something. I know guys like Rocky Marciano would do that. It was part of their kind of investment program to weaken a guy, but it's not part of the target area as such. But we're talking about women. It's an unwritten rule between women, says Julie McGowan. Do I think women are physically different in a way that means they box with different styles? I don't see why they should be, to be honest with you. What do you think, Michael?
Well, I'm glad you asked, young man. I think that I think it's the way their trainers approach women that makes them different. Yes, that's the main difference between the two. It's the way the trainers approach them. They still see them as women, not athletes, not boxers. They're not teaching them the same things or doing it the correct way. I don't think. I think that's one. Two, physiologically, I think there's a difference. I mean, women can be just as aggressive as men. But they don't carry obviously the same power. That's just the truth. That's just the way it is. The way force is projected, the way power is projected. The bones aren't as dense, the muscles aren't as big. The upper body that you allows you to turn into the punch. Just the whole force is different. So you would think because of those differences that power isn't necessarily, with the exception of some women, like you've seen Ann Wolf and the sort. There's some that really hit very hard, but generally most of them do not. So you would expect to see the skill level go up because the
To
power.
compensate.
Yeah, exactly, to compensate for the lack of power, but I just don't see that. And maybe it's because women's boxing is still in its early stages, and they don't have like a bigger pool, a bigger resource to pull women out, with female fighters out.
It's funny, some ex-pro of my acquaintance stated, I think it was last year, he said, how come no women are noted for a particular punch? Like Tommy Hearn's right hand or Joe Frazier's left hook. He said they just throw hands. You don't get a woman, they say, well, she's a lethal right-hand puncher or she's a devastating left hooker. That doesn't happen, does it? You don't have that phenomenon.
Yeah. And I think it's just because there's a lot of flailing going on. There's over-aggression, and over-aggression means you're in instinct mode and you're not in intellect mode. You're not thinking, you're not executing, you haven't tamed your beast. You know what I mean? You haven't tamed that.
Anyone who tells you that the women are on par or that they put the men to shame, that is virtue signaling of the highest order, right?
Yeah,
or
absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. I think women show a crazy amount of heart, and if you want to judge it on that level, then we can go, tit for tat on that. When it comes to heart, women show a lot of heart in their fights, but then again, it's not like they're getting dropped heavy either. But at the same time, you're getting hit that many times on the head. It does affect you. Like being punch drunk is a legitimate thing on both sides.
Well, Simon, kind of controller, as it were, she said, on Mikey's point about Katie showing potential neurological damage, could the excessive holding be due to her feeling the amount of fights she's had in her career, slowing down or struggling to keep up as such? But the thing is, when people talk about the amount of fights she's had, right, Michael and Simon, one thing I would say is that she's only had 24 pro fights. She had a lot of amateur fights. She is 37 years old. But people were talking about her like she had Harry Greb stats, saying, the end of a long veteran career. She's had 20, as of going into last night's fight, she had 23 pro fights. And
she someone said yes. Pro fights. How many amateur fights?
Hundreds, I'm sure.
Hundreds. Yeah. There was a fighter out of the USA. There were many of them, but one was named Clint Jackson. And he was amazing. He was an amazing amateur. Johnny Bumpus, an amazing amateur fighter. Once they turned pro, that was it.
Kelsey Banks.
Kelsey Banks, yes. Mm-hmm. Robert Shannon. Robert Shannon was another one out of the
double Olympian,
Sorry?
Two-time Olympian, Robert Shannon.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, incredible talent. And it's just, they burned it all. Now, we're not only talking fights, we're talking sparring as well. So many of these women like Katie, she's had hundreds of fights, but she's had thousands of sparring sessions. You know what I mean? And that changes everything. And especially if you're look at how many fights she's had and how long she's been doing it. And look at the lack of defensive skills. There should be some, you know what I mean? There should be some kind of you should be showing some defensive attributes. Obviously,
she's got good feet and good hands, right? She's got good feet, in and out, bounce, and then blistering hand speed. She still has at 37. But there's other ways to skin a cat, and there's other ways to hunt, right?
Yeah, there's more than one way to hunt, and that's what you want to do when you're at the top of the food chain as a fighter. You have to show different ways in which to do it, and she has specifically one way to do it, and it's brought her success. So they maintain that. I'm sure if there was different levels of talent or different abilities, maybe her coach shows her different things. Maybe she feels the need to learn different things. But right now, I just see like a light fog rolling in when I watch her. It's and I've seen boxers, including myself, when you're starting to get hurt. I've seen my whole life, and I just when she stops fighting, and then that sandbag drops on your head 10 years later. All of a sudden, everything's good. 5 years you're in. All of a sudden, this big sandbag drops on your head, and things start happening with your body that you don't even realize. And it's because your guys weren't about the defense when you were fighting. They were about you, going out there and going out on your shield. And no matter what you do, you're going to make a good name for women's boxing, and you're going to be a super slugger. And it's like, no, you can't do it. Can't do it.
Joe's raised a good point. Maybe she didn't have hundreds of amateur fights because there weren't that many women fighting when she started. That's really true. So do you know what? Simon could probably box rec it. You go to box rec, but then you go to box am. You got box pro and box am with box rec, and you could probably tell us how many. It won't tell us how many amateur fights Katie had, but it'll give us an indication of how many that they've got on box rec. They're incomplete records, of course, but Mr. Silk, are you ready?
She could have fought the same girl. She could have fought the same girl 365 days a year.
Do you know what? Do you know what she actually did? She fought boys at first and pretended to be a boy just because she couldn't get bouts, I believe.
No,
I believe that's part of her story.
That can't be true. What about the medical, the weigh-in or whatever beforehand?
Well, you're talking about junior boxers, kids. I think maybe even gym shows.
Yeah. Oh, it's kids, like 6, 7-year-old kids.
Well, maybe not 7, but I believe it when she was a child, she fought some boys and pretended to be a boy. I believe there is a story that once again, the veracity of that would need checking out, but it's something I heard anyway.
That would be crazy.
We've got a question for Sarge. I do want to move on to Benavides at some point, by the way, because we're like 36 minutes.
Yeah,
we'll take one more question for Sarge, which says, Ben, are there any trainers you think would make great women's trainers specifically? I think Julian will be a great women's boxer trainer, he says, and someone like Adam Booth would too. Well, I don't know why you think Adam Booth would necessarily, but I know Adam Booth was recently training Shannon Courtney. I think he still is. I believe unless she's moved trainers, she was working with Adam Booth certainly in recent years. But why do you think? See, what gives me pause, Michael? Loads of people who are not in boxing gyms and they've never met these trainers, never alone seen them work. They go, he'd be great for such and such, or he needs Freddie Roach, or do you know what? He needs Nacho Beristan. And I don't know how they figure it out, any of it.
Yeah, so much of it. Listen, some boxers, like, you learn off them. It's kind of like osmosis. Some trainers you learn osmosis. Some. It's interesting. You can have some trainers that have never boxed before, but they have a certain way of asking and expecting and teaching, and they're able to get you to the next level without even having experienced it. That's something that's without having experienced actual fights in the ring, which is really interesting to me. It's one of the things I'm really puzzled. I can't really understand how that works.
Remember we had Richie Wenton on a couple of weeks ago. Remember the scout, your fellow scouser. And he sounds more like one, I must admit. But he was saying, I mentioned Dean Powell to him. Dean Powell's not a name would be usually familiar to you, but he was a big name in British boxing 10, 20 and 30 years ago. And he was never boxed in his life, by admission, but he'd studied it. He'd swept up the gym. He'd shadowed great trainers. He'd watched Jimmy Tibbs. He'd watched other great trainers. And he kind of absorbed it all like a sponge. And some people said, oh, he shouldn't be training anybody. Don't get me wrong, he was a matchmaker and he was on the business side, and he was a manager, but he did coach as well. And some people would say, why the hell would you let Dean Powell coach you? He's never taken a punch in his life. Yeah. Whereas, did you hear Richie last week, not last week, but the other week, said he was a great trainer, one of the best. He said he had so many trainers, Richie. He said, I put him in the top 6 of trainers I ever had. That's quite a lot. That's your top 6, not even... But he said this guy who never boxed was one of the better guys he'd had, and he worked with legends like Freddie Roach and Jimmy Tibbs and Brendan Ingle and all the rest of it.
Yeah, maybe even sometimes I think even the trainers that we do consider great, maybe we should even expect more than them, more out of them than what they've. You know what I mean? So like, I'm not sure that boxing is going forward in terms of its progression as a whole, in terms of fighters' abilities. And maybe that's in part due to the fact that, trainers aren't, like, maybe we're seeing like these elite fighters like Davis and Crawford and what have you, these guys that are amazing. And maybe they're amazing because
just in spite of it.
Yeah, exactly. Or in spite of it, or the fact that I mean, it just has something to do with the. I mean, I know their trainers are pretty competent, but maybe they should be even better than that. Is what I'm saying, basically.
Well, maybe they should work harder. One thing I saw, Michael, in my time in the game was trainers who were prepared to rest on their laurels, assume they knew everything and not learn anything new. And they wouldn't know. I would talk to pro trainers, and I'd mentioned David Lemieux several years ago, and they'd shake their heads and say, "Who's that?" And I feel it's somebody they should know about. You know, that you've got fighters in and around that division. You know, all right, you're a long way away from fighting the guy, but you should be, you know, keyed into the world scene and kind of, you know, aware of what's going on. But quite frequently they weren't. I'll give you an example. Cornelius Bozer Edwards, when he was getting ready to fight Melvin the Tank Paul at London's York Hall in the, I think, 1984 or roundabouts, 85, he was training with George Francis, who was his trainer. You may remember training John Mugabe as well, and worked with Frank Bruno and a whole bunch of guys like John Conte. Me and my dad were hanging around the gym like gym rats, as we did in those days. And Bozer was training, getting ready for a fight. And we asked, "Who are you fighting?" We were talking to George Francis. He said he's fighting some fella called Paul. Surname is Paul. And we said, Melvin Paul, which is one thing, or Jimmy Paul, which was quite another, right? We said, "Are you fighting Jimmy Paul from the Kronk, or are you fighting Melvin the Tank Paul?" And George Francis interrupted Bozer from his skipping and said, "Bozer, what's the initial of the fella you're fighting? What's his name?" That, to me, that's not good enough. You know, but that was the way they were. You know, they didn't have. So maybe they could try. See, Ben Davison gets jealousy from older trainers who've been stuck in a gym for 30 years waiting for their ship to come in, and they'll see him, and he's been fast tracked. He was working with Billy Joe right into a world title fight, his first corner he ever worked on TV. Then he was worked. Next minute, he's got Tyson Fury, and he's got Freddie Roach handing up to him. And some people say he's just a boxer-sized guy made good. You know what I mean? He's just a fitness-first guy made good, and he doesn't know this, he doesn't know that, and etc. But he works hard. I know he does, and he watches boxing morning, noon, and night, and he analyzes stuff. He probably works harder than some of those older coaches who might be sacred cows. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something, Ben. What does that mean if a man who's never fought before can train a person to be a world champion, father or not included? If you've never fought before, and you can train somebody, and you can train somebody up to the point whereas they're defeating everybody else, everybody in the world, what does that say about boxing? You can. I mean, I think it's kind of.
Do we have
happened on plenty of occasions?
In order to fully answer that question, when you say what does that ultimately say about boxing, are there other sports in which coaches have frequently not played the game themselves, like tennis coaches or soccer coaches? Do you get these coaching mavericks in other sports who have been non-participants and absolutely strictly trainers?
But in their nature, inherently, they're just different from boxing. Boxing has, there are different attributes that are expected in boxing than are expected in like tennis, or like there's the pain, there's the hitting, there's the there's the defense, there's just so many other things that make up. I just feel like if a person was experienced, they'd be able to impart their experience, and that would help take a fighter to a further level. But what's this say about the general talent of boxing if you can have somebody who's never boxed before? I mean, and it's almost like it's more common than not. The guys that haven't fought before are taking people to world titles. What does that say?
I'd like to make it clear, by the way, Ben Davison did box amateur, just in case you were taking the lead strictly from the Ben Davison.
No, I wasn't talking about him. I was just talking.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. Amateur boxing counts. Absolutely, amateur boxing counts.
It better do. Well, that's the thing. That's one thing about you and Gary, by the way, is you guys never pull rank on me because I would only box amateur. You know what I mean? I've never felt that condescension from.
Well, you know what? Just wait until we get to a point where we can't explain it any other way. We can't come at you any other way.
Oh,
we
it's coming.
Come at you any other way. That's where we're going to go.
Well, do you know what? It's funny, by the way, the way your and my relationship and dynamic has developed since we worked together, because it started with all this mutual respect and deference, especially on my part, inevitably. and it's kind of, I don't know if it's degenerated is the right word, but it's progressed into this really kind of tit for tat sibling rivalry vibe, which is kind of cool anyway. But it has changed, hasn't it? It's changed.
Yeah, I don't know. I think everything's based. I think we're much more outward with our feelings. Like, we don't sort of mollycoddle them anymore. We just like say what we want to say and say it the way it should be said. And so I think, but I don't think that's a lack of respect. I think that's from the convenience of knowing somebody, and you want to just
we know each other better,
and you know that it's not. I'm not going to hurt your feelings by when I say it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I'm not saying anything so drastic that's going to cause animosity between, and you're not coming back at me the same way.
No. And you're a hard guy to offend. And even if it has cut you internally, nobody will know about it until it's too late and they realize they fucked up big time. Because you ain't gonna. What did Eddie Murphy say? He don't show his bruises on the outside. Karate Man. That's you.
That's funny.
It's me. But getting away from this more kind of introspective, self-conscious loving that we're kind of having, can we go to Vegas yet?
Let's go to Vegas. Let's go to Vegas.
So a lot of people fancied, said that Demetrius Andrade was a live dog, and a few people fancied him to spring the upset. It didn't turn out that way, Silk. He is very strong, and offensively, he is a very formidable fighter, David Benavidez, huh?
Yeah, he's. I know going in that he had good hands. You know what I mean? The kid, he comes to fight for real, and if you're going to fight him, you're going to have to come in there with a lot of skill and a lot of ability. He just does certain things that if you're average, you're not going to beat him. You can't beat him average. You have to be beyond average to beat this kid. What did you like?
Andrade looked good in the early rounds. Nice hand speed, good combination punching. But
that's the kind of thing that hardly makes sense. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't. If it isn't effective, then what good is it? If your hand speed is not effective, what good is it? I don't think that from what I saw, which is very limited, from what I saw, it wasn't effective punching. He was fast. The way his style was, it looked great. It's visually, it looks good. But was it effective? Was it like you could look at that fight and say, okay, this is going to be a different fight 3 rounds down the road?
Yeah. People are saying now after that, they're calling the Mexican Monster, I believe, Benavidez, and after him living up to that moniker last night again, people are banging the drum now for a fight with Canelo, and people in boxing certainly are saying that regardless of what other options he may favour, this is the meaningful fight in the super middleweight division. Canelo is the undisputed super middleweight champion of the world, and that's who he should fight.
So that wasn't a title fight last night. That wasn't a title fight last. That was not a title fight last night.
No, it was probably an interim title fight, but who gives a toss about interim?
How could they charge $70 for that fight? Isn't it?
Well, that's another comment. So, see, this is the thing, right? And they invent titles to justify this kind of,
price,
pay-per-views, right? You know what I mean? The price.
Yeah.
But I've always thought, I think, I think this, that boxing needs a massive clear out from the top to the bottom, up in the middle. And it would be nice to see some kind of establishment of a more integral world #1 status in every division. And that doesn't mean you freeze guys out and guys are starving and waiting for a title shot. Obviously, we'd have to try and mix the old with the new a little bit. But they do. Everything is pay-per-view now, right? If any fight is remotely decent, it's pay-per-view. It's not. Yeah. Boxing is not really on a free-to-air basis anymore, is it?
Yeah. No, it's not. And that's unfortunate because in order for fighters to become superstars, there needs to be this attachment between the public and the fighter, the public and the pugilist. You have to, and that's what NBC and ESPN and ABC and CBS over here in the States, that's what they did. They gave you familiarity with the fighter. You can identify with the personality traits. And that's what made us love our fighters. You know what I mean? Muhammad Ali, Larry Holmes, Mike Tyson, especially Mike Tyson.
Even a Ray Mancini.
Yeah, Ray Mancini, absolutely. You heard his story, the love between his father and himself, and the war story. The Italian coming up from Ohio, and his just everything about him. And you got to you get to see their personalities. You got a chance to identify with them, and they don't have that today. And that's why boxing
Exactly.
is just so like you're here one moment and you're somewhere else the next because you don't understand the person's people who are experienced in boxing absolutely know that, but the major people, that's why they have to sell it on guys spitting at each other and punching each other and all that. I'm going to
Yeah,
kill them and all the rest
because
of
there's no organic stories
now
anymore.
because there's no substance behind it.
So let's sell the fake beef every time, and he threw a
Exactly.
chair
Yeah.
and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and it's
You know what,
tired.
you're right.
It really is. It's really tired.
It is really tired, and I think this is where we are. It's funny, I was doing one of my historical boxing tours today in London, and I finished the tour at the spot where Freddie Mills died. Some people say he committed suicide, shot himself in the back of his car. Some people say he was murdered by the mafia influences, and I was explaining I had a very young audience as well. Some of them were teenage boxers who attended the tour today, amateur boxers, and I was saying that you don't realize how famous a man like Freddie Mills was in his time, in this country, and how much of indelibly imprinted he was on the national consciousness. I said, even though Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua are famous, you'll find old ladies in old folks' homes and stuff, and you'll find somebody's mother or sister doesn't really know. They know the name, but that's all they know, and they know it's a boxer. Yeah. But they don't know anything else. Whereas Freddie was a part of the national consciousness. So was Henry Cooper, So was Frank.
Yeah.
And I think you've touched on a very good point now that we don't really. They can monetize it more than they ever could, and it's big where it needs to be big for the purse string holders.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. It's not this inclusive, organic thing anymore.
Well, you know what it is, Ben. Fighters are like Pop-Tarts these days. Pop-Tarts? You get them over there?
Yeah. We got them. You warn not to burn yourself on them because when they come out the toaster, they can be real hot, and you be careful when you pick them up. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're like Pop-Tarts. They taste good, but you can't tell one from the other. Like it's good for a moment, and then all of a sudden you have just a bunch of Pop-Tarts. You can't tell what's what. It has no character.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's exactly what Pop-Tarts are, and that's kind of like what it's like with fighting these days. Just these personalities will pop up. These guys will show, and some of them are really talented, and some of them are just
averagely so.
Substance behind them, and they're here today, gone tomorrow, and people don't get a chance to identify with them, and that's what's so important. Like kids back in the day looked up to these guys as their heroes, the Rocky Marcianos, the Jake LaMottas, the Sugar Ray Robinsons, the Muhammad Alis, and they're iconic forever. But I don't know if you're going to find too many fighters today that can go down as iconic fighters. Maybe it's just by the nature of this current sport. Like everything's a Pop-Tart. As long as
you know what
you're as good as this thing is as good as long as it's in your mouth. That's when it's good. Once it's gone, it's gone.
Tragically enough, I was training some kid over the last couple of years. He's about, I guess he was like 11 and 12 and 13 as these training sessions were progressing. And all he ever said to me was, can you get me a message from KSI? You've met KSI. That's unbelievable. Now, I've met a few fighters of the great and good, right? If he wanted to show off to a starry-eyed kid like me, if it had met the older me today, would have been like, my goodness, all these legends that you've met and rubbed shoulders with. This kid just wanted to know, could I get him any kind of audience whatsoever or contact from KSI, which is that's pretty tragic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But how could he get anything else? Because in his world, that's all he sees, KSI. That's what he's seeing the whole time. And the brothers out here, that's what they're seeing. That's the news. Everyone gets their news from the internet now, and that's where these guys have cornered their market. And fighters don't really work any harder than they have to. They're like, look, I train, I fight. It's hard as hell. I'm not going to go hustle on the internet for another, and do these little 1-minute screen grabs for people and all. Nobody wants to do that. They're about the work. They're about their business. So that leaves room for guys like Jake Paul.
Would you see what Eddie Hearn said the other day? He said, fighters, there's a lot of negativity from fighters about the YouTubers and the influencers. He said, and they're like, this is not fair. I've trained my whole life to try and get in a good position. And Eddie Hearn said, it's very fair. They built that marketing, they built that fan base. And they built enough of a fan base to do whatever they choose, and they chose boxing. He said, it's very fair.
I can certainly understand that perspective as well, because it is what it is. You get what you can get. You know what I mean? The world is, you're a hunter. You go out into the world, you hunt, you bring home what you can kill, and that's kind of like the way it is generally in this situation or in this society anyway. You get in where you fit in, and if there's an audience for it, there's an audience for it. And yeah, you may be faking boxing and all the rest of that kind of stuff, but I guess people want to see fake boxing as well, and that's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. But nothing's fair in that court of opinion. Nothing's fair there. Everything is open. Everything is open, and ultimately you can take what their energy and you can spin it and bring, but it takes work. I mean, there's no doubt these guys work for it. They obviously shouldn't be qualified or thought about or spoke in the same sentence as a real boxer or a real MMA guy or whatever else. You know what I mean? And I always thought, quickly as a quick aside, one of the worst things that bothered me so much is like, what's his name? Conor McGregor did all that talking before the Mayweather fight. And he got all that money, and they both generated a lot of money, a whole lot of interest. So to your point about this YouTube boxing and all the rest of that kind of stuff, entertainment boxing, and they finally get in the ring, and Floyd finally did all the work to get him ready to go. And what did the referee do before Floyd got a chance to land? He pulled the plug on it. I'm like, you're getting paid $75 million, and you did all that talking, and all this, you guys went back and forth. It's the moment of truth. You got to eat this. You got to, now he's got you tired. He got you exactly where he wants. There's a minute left in the round, and you got another round to go. And the referee, as soon as he wobbled a little bit, pulled the plug. I was like, that's what I'm paying to see, dog. You can't do that but at that point right there, if the referee would have let that go and Floyd would have put a 10 count on him, seriously hurt him, boxing would have had much more respect, and you wouldn't have these guys coming in talking all sorts of crap because they see McGregor, a real fighter, laid out for 10 by a guy who is not known as a big KO puncher and 20 pounds lighter or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So it's like they rob boxing of a clean finish and to show that, hey, don't step into this turf.
And, they could have nipped the whole thing in the bud. Joe's got a question. Joe has a question for you.
Yes, sir. A memory test from Michael. I failed it already. Does he remember who fought 40 years ago this week?
Who he fought? You fought him.
Who I fought 40 years ago this week. 40 years ago. So wait a minute. I was, one second. 40 years ago this week. It's coming back to me. I must have been, so it's 40 years ago. So I'm going to be 60 soon. So that's 20 years ago. So it would have to be in my pros.
Yeah.
It'd have to be in my pros 20 years ago this week, 40 years ago this week. I mean, so you're sure it was 40 years ago, Joe?
It's on your record, no doubt. He's in the public domain, and he's obviously found it.
Okay, let me see. 40 years ago.
Just before Christmas, 83, who did you fight?
Wait, no, I was retired by then, 93. I stopped fighting in 1993. 93. I stopped.
83.
Oh, Jesus. Why do you keep saying 90? You got a sock in your mouth?
Can everybody please confirm I said 80? I'm gonna cut this clip and give it to you every day of the week.
I swear to God, you said 93.
Guys, what did I say? And don't anybody dare take the piss and start going along with him.
Okay, so 83. Who did I fight in 83? God, it was definitely in Canada. It could have been, Roosevelt Green. I remember him. Roosevelt Green, Joe Banks. It could have been Al Ford, who was a real good fighter. He fought a lot of good guys. He said 83.
Look, Johnny Melfer, 83.
But these
Everybody
are all,
knows I said 83.
Dan, these are all people that you know. I don't know. They're kind of like running on your side.
Yeah. Well, one of them's mixed race, if that helps. So you don't feel totally railroaded.
What kind of okay.
And the other guy's Asian, actually. So I don't even have any Caucasian jurors on this panel.
Really?
Yeah. 83. Joe says 83. So sometimes you get it wrong. It's just okay to admit that.
83. Joe said 83. God, I can't even. Wait a minute.
His name was Stacy, apparently.
Stacy McSwain.
Yeah, there you go. Who also fought Wilfred Benitez and Errol Christie.
He fought Errol Christie. He also fought who's the kid out in Italy? He really good fighter.
Minchillo?
No. He fought Michael Nunn. Actually knocked him out, which is a surprise.
Kalambe.
Sambu Kalambe.
Yeah, Kalambe.
Yeah, I think it was Sambu Kalambe also. Well, anyway, Stacy McSwain, when I fought him, that fight was hell. Ben, let me tell you something. We went, man, that was a great fight.
Yeah. Because he went the distance with 10 rounds with Benitez too.
Yeah, and I had fought him, and I was at, get this, he was a middleweight. I was a junior welterweight, and it was Michael Spinks had come to town, and he was fighting Oscar Rivadeneira on that card.
Oh yeah.
And so the whole crowd, the whole city was talking about it, and we're like, we got to get on that card. So we talked to Butch, and Butch was like, yeah, we're going to put you in, but we're not going to put you in easy. You're setting the event. And I had only had 5 fights at the time. 5 fights, and I was coming in. Well, anyway, nobody wants to hear this, but anyway, it was a hell of a fight. He was Michael Spinks, one of Michael Spinks' sparring partners, and tough as hell. This guy was incredibly strong, much stronger than me. He was a middleweight. I was a junior welterweight, but I fought him. I dropped him a couple of times. He actually dropped me in that fight.
Yeah.
Well.
Breaking up a little there. Apologies if you're seeing a still screen where there should be Michael Olajide.
Yeah, and none of them put him on his back twice like I did, and I was only a junior welterweight. So, there are certain things like that to me that was one of my great moments. Like when you feel like I've arrived.
Coming of age. Yeah.
Coming of age, because I really went through some rough ocean over on that fight. That was crazy.
Was it filmed?
And it was filmed by BCTV, I think at the time, or CKVU.
It'd be great to get the footage.
I do have the fight somewhere. I don't know, not in my house or in my person. I think my mom has it.
Okay, we're going to upload some of that stuff at some point. Hope for your legacy.
I got to get it at some point. I've had some pretty interesting, wild fights back in the day, and against some really good fighters. I didn't. Unfortunately, I wish I would have got a lot more, guys that were going to take a quick exit early. But there was some really good fighters in there.
Don't you think you should do an autobiography at some point, because you do have a pretty unique take on? You have an intelligent take on boxing, which is quite rare to find from a fighter. Not that I'm confirming any stereotypes of fighters. And I think the way you captivatingly write on Facebook, and you get compliments even from really good writers like Joseph Dobrian. Do you not think that the Silk Diaries should? I know Iceman John Scully's been promising to release his book for about 20 years now, the Iceman Diaries. But how about the Olajide Diaries? I think it might be looking at something.
Johnny's bio is on ice. Let's just put it that way. Mine, I don't know if I really care to in that.
You wouldn't necessarily want to put the energy into it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I have to accomplish still before I, hit that rocking chair. And hopefully if I can get that length into it, then I can have a little bit more to write about, if it's even interesting to anybody. I mean, I look at some of the fighters' stories that exist out there today, and mine just pales in comparison. I couldn't even begin to start telling my story in light of, some of the stories I've heard. So it doesn't excite me to kind of want to do that. And I don't necessarily that excited about my own thing. I think, I'm disappointed in a lot of ways, and it brings up a lot of, I wish I would have, and all the rest of that kind of stuff. So it's kind of
maybe, maybe at some point in the next 10 years, maybe we'll do a biography instead, and I'll do it. I'll write it, but I'll just ask you questions and stuff, and then maybe I'll do it for you.
Yeah, well, thank you, but I don't even like questions.
Okay, what, you don't?
No,
that's true. You don't like questions, huh?
Yeah, I don't like questions. I'm a what do they call it? Like, not an autocrat, but something like an autocrat.
Yeah, well, I've I remember when Sugar Ray Leonard did some appearances in the UK in 2015, I guess it was, and he decided not to be interviewed and have the typical anodyne sometimes interview at these after dinner things. He just spoke to the crowd himself because that way he controlled the whole narrative.
Yeah, I understand that. But what I did want to say about getting back with the circuitous route to Andrade and Benavidez, you know what I love, Ben, about this fight going into it? What I loved about it, and sorry for like the meandering, we went way off track here, but we're going to pull it right back to Andrade and Benavidez. I love the mutual acknowledgement between the two of them at the end of the fight. That's often the best part of a fight. When you see fighters, they when you see them with that mutual respect for one another, that means it was a clean competition. Like that was like both of them broke apart their life. They put it on the line, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And they both made it through. One of them made it through, and he lost. One of them made it through, and he won. But they have that mutual respect for one another. When they see each other 30 years down the road, they're still going to be able to smile and shake hands, even if they've never talked to one another for the last.
A good example of that was you and Aaron Barkley today. I know Sarge Ali wanted you to talk about the Barkley fight because perhaps he's never heard you expand upon it before. But you got an interview, a short little interview with Iran the Blade Barkley, didn't you? In New York this weekend.
Yeah.
We're going to release it. We just need to do a bit of production on it. But
it's really
you're still a good example, right? I mean, that was billed as a grudge match at the time. He said, "I want to thank Madison Square Garden for the opportunity to break his bones." Is what he said. So you guys are cool today, huh?
You're bringing back the trauma. You're bringing back the trauma, Ben. I forgot all about that.
The line you told me is better when he said, he said he thinks he's dark and lovely. I'm going to make him dark and ugly. I didn't know that, so you told me that.
You know what? I blame that one on Mike. What's his name? The post writer. I swear to God, I'm like, that didn't come from Iran. I know that came from you because he's the one.
Wally Matthews or someone? Or
no, it wasn't Wally Matthews. It was another. Oh man, I can't believe I'm forgetting who it was. Wally Matthews is good, but he was with Newsday. The Post at the time, I see him visually. I just with dark hair.
New York Post writer.
Yeah, he was the Post in the 80s. Mike. It was Mike something.
Marley.
Bob Marley. No, not Bob Marley. Bill Marley.
Michael Marley.
Don Marley. Michael Marley. Yes.
Michael Marley, yeah.
Mike Marley. Yeah, that was it. Mike Marley. That was it. And
it wasn't. Can't drag Bob Marley into this. Don't start playing him. Who the cat fits, eh?
Irie, man. That was a real line. It was funny. And one time Mike Tyson got in between the two of us. We were all three of us were at the Garden, and we were sitting together, and Iran was saying stuff and I was saying stuff, and Mike was kind of like, gaslighting it kind of thing. And it was funny. We started to get a little bit heated, but Mike was good with that. He did that with me a lot because he did it at the same time with the Weaver triplets too. They were all middleweights and they wanted a piece. And Mike was just like poking that, trying to get it started.
Talking of Mike, since you're on such good terms, I think, don't you think if you asked Mike Tyson to come on Sugar Silk and Stretch, he may do it for you?
No.
You don't think so? No?
You know what? I don't.
I think Sugar Ray would.
I think Sugar Ray might as well. Yeah, that's. I mean, yeah, that's.
So why don't you approach him then? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Why don't, if I have to approach him, wouldn't you? You going to pay for the flight for me to?
Oh, what? You got to actually do it in person. You can't just like use the sort of telecommunications that people use these days. You want me to send you to Los Angeles and go find him?
He couldn't say no. He couldn't say no to me if I were there in front of him. Physicality, but
well, okay. Change your plan. Let's both go to LA. You do the talking.
If I tell you what, if we get to LA, we'll definitely get that interview. Sugar's
okay. Well, we're gonna listen. The channel is building. The channel is burgeoning. We're getting a little bit of traction. So we can do those things. We've already done one trip, right? We've already managed to put one trip on the books. The Atlantic There'll be more where that came from. Yeah.
And I'm gonna turn the steering wheel back to the right with the Andrade Benavidez fight. I think Andrade made the mistake of fighting flat-footed in front of the Mexican monster. You know what I mean? You have to be close to James Toney level of fighter in order to
get away with that.
To get away with that, you can't stand in front of somebody like Benavidez because he knows how to punch in the gaps, in the holes. Like what he's strong enough to take what you have to offer, but he also does this. He covers up like this, and what people do, especially, I don't want to say ordinary fighters, but predictable fighters will punch at him, and they'll punch not around his hands or through his hands, or they were not looking for an opening. They're just looking at it as a chance to punch. And so they're punching anywhere, and they're punching his shoulders and his arms and his forearm and his gloves. And you know, he's bent over to the side, so his ribs are in his hips, so that muscle is there. So they're digging through his body, but he's flexed. So he's not feeling it. It has no impact whatsoever. And what they're doing is they're draining their battery. They're losing the ability to execute. And they're also losing confidence because they're hitting him and they think they're hitting him hard, but they're not getting through and they're not damaging him. And for that, and that, not only that reason, a few other reasons, but then when you finish punching, you're not moving your head afterwards. And he comes right back, Benavidez. He'll come right back. He's got good hand speed. He's respectable. And he's got good power. He whips his punches, so he's got his body weight behind his punches. And you don't have that defensive, that James Toney lights out kind of like, you can't roll with punches. You can't get away. Yeah. You're not, your footwork isn't a part of your plan either. You're standing there right in front of him. So if you don't have any defensive attributes and you don't have any footwork, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get hit. And that's exactly what happened in this fight.
Yeah, which sounds like another kind of case for your ever-growing list of concerns about coaching these days and people being able to read situations rather than just going while the going's good and going with what a fighter does well and taking the wins and then not knowing what to do when you find yourself in a crisis or a bigger challenge.
And how many fighters have you ever seen being able to like switch up when things are going bad or not? Especially, how many fighters have the ability to switch up? Like it's so few and far between. And that's one of the skills. And maybe that's the reason why there are so many fighters that are trained by guys that aren't, that were not exceptional fighters themselves. Maybe if there were exceptional fighters that went back into the game, they'd be able to, those are the kind of experiences they'd be able to impart to their charge.
But they need the patience as well, wouldn't they? Because the syndrome that is often described is that guys like, geniuses in the ring are not necessarily good at communicating it, and they tend to be patient with mere mortals who don't have their gifts,
Well, that was one of the points that came up with Aaron Barkley last night. He goes, I just don't have the patience to even bother with these guys. It's like
he said that.
Yeah. And that's most fighters. Poison Junior Jones I spoke to. Most guys are like, yeah, listen, it's just such an effort. And there's no guarantee you're going to see anything on the other side. You know what I mean? And there's nobody that's coming to you with no fights. That's going to, you're going to be splitting $300 between the two of you for the first 10 fights at least.
Tell me about it. Do you know what? That's why I went off training for professional fighters, because it wasn't a lack of financial reward where he gets £1,000, which you've trained him for months for it, but you've gone for him for his license, you've made the transition so he's able to become a pro because he's been an amateur. You've spent a year with him. He makes his debut. If he sells all the tickets and he needs to sell 100 of them to get his £1,000 purse, you get £100 of that. It wasn't even that. It was the fact you're training them to fight journeymen who literally tell you they're not trying to win beforehand. I've had them say, one of my guys fought a guy who was 12 stone 2 when he was only 10 stone 10, and he was worried. And the other guy said, listen, I didn't know I was fighting. I've had several weeks off. I was supposed to be at a barbecue today. I'm heavy, but I'm fat, and I'm just going to move around, so don't panic. So that was what took the kind of soul out of it for me. Don't get me wrong. I realize if you persevere, you get past that level, it gets pretty exciting. And I have been involved with fighters who've been on TV and been in title fights, and it's been a bit more glamorous. But I got fed up with the bottom rung, to be honest with you. And I also found it a bit repetitive in the gym all the time.
Yeah, it really is. And that's exactly what you need, repetition, in order to be good. But one of the things, it's a sin that fighters have to sell tickets in order to get on a card. Like, what is the promoter's job? What's your?
You say that, Silk, but there wouldn't be any fights if the fighters didn't sell the tickets. You just wouldn't have any small hall shows. What you need to understand is the audience is not there anymore. It just isn't there anymore. It's not a question of a job.
I understand that, but it's not there. But it's not there. But what is a promoter supposed to do? And you know what? And what is a manager supposed to do? The manager is the one that's supposed to like take you and develop you and get those people. The fact that I have to like train and I've had to train for 10 years and now I've got as an amateur 5 years, whatever. And now I'm starting off as a professional. And for the next 3-4 years, I have to, train my ass off, fight, then go and take a handful of tickets and sell them to people on a corner or whatever I have to do in order for them to come to see my fight. That's like, why am I doing your job, dog?
But if you're not an attraction, then maybe you shouldn't turn pro, because an amateur is when you box for the sporting glory of it and to achieve stuff. But if you're not an attraction, then maybe there's no call.
No, but as an amateur, Ben, they don't know your personal story. Your and it really doesn't matter because your ratings are determined by an organization, right? Like from day one, the Amateur Boxing Association has got.
But you're encouraged to build a following in the amateurs. People who are savvy about the program. I remember reading a book by Henry Cooper, which was kind of a how to become a professional boxer guide for those who are thinking seriously of making a life and a career out of this. And he recommended guys build their following in the amateurs because then they have them, and he was talking, it wasn't as savage and cutthroat as it is today. There was more of an organic grassroots audience in his era for boxing. But, the fact is, people know it's a commercial forces thing. And if you have a following and you're popular and you pack out venues or you sell your portion of the venue, then you're obviously going to be more in demand in professional boxing than you are if you can't draw flies,
Yeah, but if you can't draw flies and you're a good boxer, that plays
somebody's fault.
You know what I mean? It's like it's So the guy who's good and can't sell tickets because he doesn't know enough people, or maybe he's just not outward. He's just not an outward individual. What's going to happen? He's just going to sit on the sidelines, and you're going to give it to some guy who's less talented but knows.
And that happens, Michael. What the syndrome we have in the UK? We have often white working class lads who come from a big, healthy kind of grassroots working class culture where there's the football team or their dad's on a local rugby, not rugby, that's a bit upper class, but the football team and all the rest of it. And he's got lots of mates, and this kid sells 400 tickets. He sells out the whole balcony of the York Hall. He's blue-eyed, he's white, he's good looking, he talks all right, he's a bit cheeky. He goes places. You get the young black kid from the hood who might be the next Ray Robinson, but he's got all his mates are either, some of them are in prison, some of them are in gangs. He can't sell a ticket. Some of them just don't have the money. His parents might come, or his sister might come. And they don't get opportunities because they can't sell a ticket. And they may be the next Ray Robinson.
And that all comes down to that's the lifeblood of the sport. You know what I mean? And it comes down to the fact that the fans aren't being educated on what a good fighter is. Basically, they don't know.
Which exactly.
Generally, they can't look at somebody and tell you the difference between that guy and this guy.
Which is why we get this situation where there's not enough money in Crawford versus Ennis. If people were educated and had the right information, that would be the big money fight. That would be the one people want to see.
That again. You have to say it again, which is why?
Which is why you get a situation where they said there's not enough money for Crawford versus Ennis. Because the audience is too ignorant to understand that it's the most meaningful fight out there in the welterweight division.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for Canelo and Benavidez. And this is why Ryan Garcia the other day said, if Tank wants a rematch, he's got to come to me. I'm the bigger draw. He actually said that. that is the insanity we live in, Silk.
But and so why would Tank want a rematch? That was pretty decisive ending. I
guess he thinks he wants the money again that he got for knocking him out the last time.
Yeah. I think he could probably make more money than that with other fighters. You know what I mean?
You would hope so, wouldn't you? But this is what Ryan Garcia believes: he's still the A side and still the draw. That's what's in his head.
I think he would. He would wake up to a reality if they fought again. He wouldn't get as much. It's preposterous. Even just talking about it is just like this. I don't even know. It hurts my brain.
Yeah.
Ryan Garcia talking about Tank Davis it's just nuts. Leave that alone.
Mick Thompson says, of course, lazy promoters love fighters that sell tickets. Just look at Eddie Hearn promoting Dave Allen and Joe Laws. See, there's the thing. Dave Allen was this pretty big phenomenon as far as he was never going to win anything truly special. He was never going to become a world-class heavyweight, but he was box office because he was personable. His story was, they liked his story. He sold tickets from the ground level up. Yeah. And he's done really well and got on bills because, especially in this era, social media, he came across well on social media and he gathered more fans in that particular manner. So guys like that get a push when they're not that good.
Well, for better or for worse, it's business and it always comes down to money. So I can understand that, but at some point there has to be some integrity in what you do. And money is sometimes, is often a show of integrity, but often it isn't. And it just depends.
I agree with you. Exactly that. I could not agree with you more. Considering we've been disagreeing about things lately and getting a bit more comfortable with the fact that we are able to argue the toss on, ad infinitum. I couldn't agree with you more when you say, yes, it's about money. It always has been. And we all know that people need to eat and live and that people want things and they're material. But there has to be some integrity somewhere along the line. Otherwise, why are we doing it? There has to be a cutoff point. There has to be a bit at which we say, sorry, guys, I'm out. I'm not down with this.
Yeah, right? It really does. And that's, and everyone's selfish and they're always about me and in the immediate. And nobody's considering the good of the sport. It's like, okay, I can make 500 million now if I do this. You know what I mean? But that means if you do this now for $500 million, down the road, the sport's going to be worth $100 million. But they don't care because it's about their get. And
that's what Dana White says. Dana White says every fight in boxing is a going out of business sale. He said every big promotion is like a going out of business sale with no vision and foresight and the idea of trying to grow a brand and a sport.
Exactly. Yeah. There's just there's no consideration for anything else. It's like, get what you can get right now. And that's it. And that has hurt this sport that had such a tight grip, such a vice grip on the highest amount of respect that you can get as a sportsman. Like if you're a boxer, you're a world champion anywhere from you know what I mean? From, I guess, anywhere outside of the last 10, 15 years, you were seen as practically a man god. You know what I mean? Like to be world champion, it really meant something. And now
it just doesn't today. Listen, Shakur Stevenson became a triple champion this week, I think, didn't he? Was it this week or was it last week? But either way, I think it was this week. But he became, that was his third world title he won, and it just doesn't matter, does it anymore?
Yeah, and I didn't see that fight either.
Well, did you hear it broke the record for the lowest amount of punches thrown in a world title fight? I think
I didn't know that. How many punches were thrown?
12 around, from the winner.
Wow.
I believe it was a dozen around, something like that on average. But they said he broke a record for the lowest output numbers. And apparently Shakur was injured. He had a bad, whether it was a shoulder, I don't think it was his hand. I think, or one of his hands. I think it was arm or shoulder related, and he had trouble, I think, throwing the rear hand as a southpaw. He said he had to be ultra conservative. He said he didn't feel good. He didn't feel good going in. I think he said he felt a bit under the weather as well. But it was a real snore fest. I watched what are normally called highlights. I watched an edited approximation of the action, shall we say?
And you got a sense of
highlights.
You got a good sense of what it was from there.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think would you? I mean, you love the sport. Would you see all of it? Would you watch all of it?
Sure. I mean, I haven't chosen to, but if somebody required me to watch it all, I would watch all of it. Listen.
Okay, so Ben, that's your homework for next weekend.
So you're setting homework now. That's okay. Cool. It sounds like a punishment because of the nature of
your homework is to watch the whole fight.
Sure. Well, do you know Sonny Edwards, who's fighting Ben Rodriguez?
just because I'm smiling, I'm a happy person. I'm not trying to punish you.
No, I get it. I remember Sonny Edwards saying when everybody was slagging Guillermo Rigondeaux off, saying he was almost like Mahatma Gandhi in terms of aggressive output, and he was saying that's my favorite fighter. I love watching him. So Sonny loved watching him even when the whole rest of the world was slagging him off, saying the guy never throws a punch in anger. So I could probably find some artistry in Shakur's display. I don't doubt.
It's a taste. It's a taste. It absolutely is. I've had like some fighters that were favorites of mine that didn't get busy, and I couldn't understand why. I myself have had the only fight that I've ever done this, and that was in my fight with Hearns, and for the first 6-7 rounds, you know what I mean? Man, I was getting booed. I was throwing very few punches, but that was, you know what I mean? That was the kind of game plan that that was set out for me, and that's what they wanted me to adhere to. It wasn't necessarily. It's never been my way of doing things, but you have to do what the team sort of like decides. But at some point, you got to put your foot down and say, okay, you're going to cross this line now. It's time to go. And from what I understand, Stevenson never did that.
No, I don't believe he did.
And the thing is, it doesn't matter whether you're injured or not. At some point, that injury you have to adapt and come along with something and bring something that's going to, make the fight memorable. You can't.
Or else don't fight. Or else don't fight.
Yeah, and I don't know why he couldn't. He's the A side in the fight. He could call that fight at any point.
Yeah.
Exactly. So he must have said. He must have said to himself, "I don't think that." It's beyond me. I can't even think in that way. I don't know. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. On that note, I think this might be our longest show ever so far. 1 minute and 25.
Didn't feel like it.
Yeah, well, no, it's different. Like I say, without Gary, it just feels more sedate. It's something that it's like I say. I like the trio. I like the way it works. Yeah. But sometimes it's nice to turn it down. Sometimes, maybe one time we'll have to do a show where it's just you two and there's no me. That'll be interesting. I'll just sit back with popcorn.
Yeah. and then in turn, I'll watch you two. And I think, let me see, what would that be like if you two were to just do it together? I mean, you'd be agreeing with one another a lot. I could see that. It wouldn't be.
But me and you agree with each other against him a lot of the time. To be fair.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's when he becomes a contrarian.
Somebody commented on one of the shows saying Stretch talks the most sense, which absolutely is wrong, by the way. And me and the Silk will tell you right now it's wrong.
Did that come from England? Because then, if it was, they should have been using the word hence.
Probably, almost certainly. Yeah. But for anyone who's wondering, Gary's busy with some projects right now in Bulgaria, I believe. He may be back next week, or it may be one more week. But in the meantime, we'll keep taking care of you. It's still Sugar, Silk, and Stretch, with or without Gary on this occasion. And I'm ready. I'm ready to make that a wrap if you are, Silk.
Yeah, I was just going to say, unlike, let me let it go. I'm not going to stick my foot in my mouth. But we miss Gary. Can't wait to get him back. I'm still leading in terms of
predictions.
We
need to get back on that. In order to get that, we need to get back on the Fridays again.
So I've been leading now for what's it been? How long has it been since that fight?
It's been a few weeks since the last one. I don't get it. You must have missed one of them because me and Gary are 3-2 and you're 3-1. So you're winning because you have one less loss. Which means you must have sat one of them out because you've got one left. There was one that you didn't do a prediction on.
I don't know. I think was I traveling or something? I don't know.
Yeah, you were traveling. You guys
didn't ask me. But
then I would have been. It could be argued you're not really leading. You just missed out one of the fights, so you don't.
No, then I could potentially have been 2 up too, which
True.
And initially, when I decided to do this with you, when we decided to put this thing together, I just messed around with a couple of things. I didn't make them. I wasn't serious about it. I was just saying, let me just play around with these guys. But once you put my back to the wall and you saw how accurate my call was with Fury, and Ngannou and Fury, you saw. I mean, I called it to the knockdown, to the win for Tyson. I mean, come on, guys. You got to give me my props.
Yeah, props duly given. Guys, thanks for watching as always. We appreciate it. Without you, there would be no point. I've been Ben Doughty. He's been Michael Elijah. In the meantime, be lucky, keep punching. Peace out.
Peace.